2.5. They have pretty standard numerical apertures. The 5 is at 0.15. 10 is...
The highest at 25, you said?
Yeah. And then so those are the objectives, and so that's going to determine your field of view and X, Y, and Z resolution. And then we have 3 different mirrors, mirror caps, and their separation distance is different. So there's a 2.5 millimeter gap, there's a 5 millimeter gap, and then a 7.8 millimeter gap. And so the larger the mirror, the spacing, the more Z is excited at once. So the light sheet waist is what it's called. It gets thicker in Z. And so there's different kind of mirror pairings of detection objective and mirror. I can give you a chart. It's also the software of which objectives are kind of designed to work with different mirror sets. Any questions so far?
How do you clean up the objective after you use it? Because you have to dip into the culture medium, potentially, right?
Just skim wipe. I mean, if it's like culture medium, maybe like some ethanol. Just typical objective cleaning rules. So back to the samples. So you could kind of make a layer of agarose, put your sample on, put more agarose so it's solidified, and you kind of cut away, because the sample has to be surrounded by the mirrors. The mirrors have to come down around the sample. So you have size constraints to how wide the sample can be. So the widest, in this way, I guess in X, the sample can be is about 5 millimeters, because the 7.8 millimeter mirror housing, you want a little bit of room on each side, kind of shift a little bit. So 5 millimeters is the largest in X you can go. And then in Y you can go as long as the dish. This is a 35 millimeter dish. You could also put a 60 millimeter dish on there. These can be a lot longer, but typically you wouldn't have something that's that long and that thin. And your Z height of the sample is going to be kind of limited by the working distance of the objective.
Is this a real sample or is it just a...
No, this is fake. Well, I mean, it's real. It exists, but it's so. This is a FEP tube. I can't remember what FEP stands for, but it's kind of it's a plastic wall tube, and it has a very similar refractive index to water. So when you put water in here, there's not a huge refractive index change from tube to water, so that you don't get crazy.
So the petri dish we use, it has to be matching the
glass bottom dish.
Yeah.
So not petri dish, the glass bottom.
The glass
culture,
bottom.
yeah, culture dish. So it has to be a cover slip bottom, so the laser's not kind of diffracted.
Well, cover slip typically we use a 1.5.
Yeah. Well, yeah. A number 1.5. Yeah. So these are typical matte tech or Amibity glass bottom dishes. They're for cell culture. It's a plastic dish with a hole cut out and a cover slip basically glued to it. So it's a cover slip bottom. Because laser has to go through. You don't want plastic or thick glass because it'll deform the laser, which is typical optical rules. So the FEP tube should have, this is like a test sample for like training and demos and calibration. It should have fluorescent beads in agarose, but it got damaged, so now it kind of dried up really bad. So you can still see stuff, right? Of course I did that. You can still see an image, but it's not pretty because all the beads and agarose are all crappy.
Do you still put a Monto oil at the bottom of it?
No. So the illumination objectives are all dry air, 2.5, 1.6, 2.5, or 5. And so that has no effect on resolution. It just needs to be large enough to view the entire lens above it, because the field of view of the illumination objective has to be able to bend out and excite and basically use a laser and hit the mirror. So they're all dry air here. The detection objectives are all water dipping objectives. And then it's kind of mounted, I'm not sure what this material is. It might be like dental sealant or Play-Doh, but you just kind of stick a tube in there. This is one thing, tubes, we have And we also have these really handy U-shaped capillaries, which are 3-sided U-shaped glass troughs. You're going to see what they look like. So they're 2.5 millimeters wide by 20 long. So you can mount samples in there. You can put like agarose and sample in there, and the trough just helps you kind of keep it all together in a nice line. And then that way you don't have to flood the whole thing with agarose and cut away. It gets a little bit tedious depending on how small the sample is. And then you can mount these capillary troughs to the dish. My favorite way is with like silicone vacuum grease. So that's typically purchased for like vacuum tubing, just form seals. It's kind of a pretty thick, viscous silicone grease. It's basically non-toxic, it won't affect stuff in there. It's not really water soluble, so it won't dissolve into the water that you're going to be putting it in. And it stays, it doesn't set, it doesn't harden. So you just put a little dollop of the vacuum grease on each side, and you kind of just stick the capillary into it, and it kind of pulls into place. It works really well.
Is glass or plastic?
These?
Yeah.
Glass. So
Glass.
they're a little bit expensive, but they are reusable. So you can clean them and autoclave them. And they're really, really helpful. So let's. The other thing is, this is your transmitted light arm. So typically you have your LED lamp on the back here, but this is a light sheet version, so LED's on top, and then we have the camera on the back. So if it wasn't clear, light sheet is a camera-based wide field-esque technique. So it's a camera there. This condenser is not a normal microscope condenser. It's the DLS condenser, so it has a vector turret, which you wouldn't find typically in a condenser. And then here are your like fluorescent filter, like bandpass filters. It's a wide field technique. The traditional like right field condenser is right here, which is normal. So working distance lens, DIC, base contrast prisms in here. So you can leave the DLS condenser on if you're using this for a normal confocal microscopy. You just wouldn't have an objective on, because normal confocal microscopy, you don't need this transmitted light arm. You're just using basically incident light, lasers, internal detectors. This part doesn't matter. If you want to do like nice DIC or phase contrast imaging with